So this week we're going to explore how the sides support the other. You know, the opposite elbow and knee, or the knee and elbow on the same side, how the shoulder and hip can move toward each other, can hold each other, or move away from each other. And the holding that I'm talking about is different to the way we would normally consider holding, as something that needs to let go of, and, some form of personal repression. It's a way of actually stabilizing one part of the body so that another part can move, or holding yourself in a way that gives a different quality to movement. And it's the way that happens around the cylinder of the torso, or around the cylinder of the whole body, from the front to the back and each side, and with twists that can really create and allow smooth, effortless movement. And it's something that we often think about from the outside, but it's also interesting to consider it from the perspective of the tube and of the cardiovascular system, so the space inside the rib cage, and the capacity to roll. If the pelvis and the rib cage and the head were like balls with limbs that would extend off them, and they could each roll towards and away from each other, and the whole ellipse of the torso could alter its shape to allow movement in particular directions. So, it'll be focused somewhat on the shoulder joints, shoulder girdle, because, we're heading up toward squatting, but I think actually we're going to get to squatting next term when we work with the more with the hands and the arms. But, when we roll over, we learn to, first of all, when we're babies, we have to learn to lift our heads. So we roll over, we learn to control the muscles within our torso through there, or gain control of them. And then, we lift ourselves up on our elbows first, and then up onto our hands, and then onto our knees. So it's a little bit easier to organize that, and it's perhaps more necessary because the elbows are closer to the head, and that's the first problem that we have, is how to lift that massive head with this tiny body and tiny limbs. So perhaps we'll look at some images just to remind us of how the shoulder girdle can actually move, because we will move it round in a circle. And then we'll look at some dancers moving and get a sense of how the in smooth, effortless movement, how we counterbalance with the other side, when both in ourselves and also when working with a partner. So let's just share my screen here. Yeah, well, let's just look at this guy first. I don't know whether you've had the pleasure of having coffee in India. Milk coffee in India, it's amazing. This is the way they mix the milk, and this is done with a great deal of style. So, oops, wait a minute, we'll get back to here. Here we go. No, how did I do that? 52. So notice how each side works. He has to do that because he's pouring the coffee and the milk from, well, actually it may not be coffee, it may be a lassi he's mixing or something, but he's pouring it from side to side, and that keeps the supporting the liquid in the air through that movement. And he's doing it with a great deal of style and panache. But, look what's happening in the opposite legs, and how each arm on each side is supporting the other one. You know, they're working together, communicating in order to support this liquid. You know, and what is the direction that his shoulder girdle is moving in? That's a really interesting thing to consider. And just look at these movements of the scapula again. How it can move in a circle. You know how it slides around the rib cage here, and you know it's connected here, but this is mobile. And that muscle here, the serratus, you know, that attaches to the ribs, attaches to the inside border. Here we are of the scapula. And I'm showing you these really just to remind yourself of the different directions, you know, and the importance of moving the shoulder blade. So many arm problems really occur because the shoulder girdle here won't move, the shoulder blade doesn't move, and then, you know, people use more effort in the shoulder, and, you know, that causes more pressure. But, you know, it slides right around here. And this is a ball and socket joint. It's a very small little cavity that you have in here, but it's surrounded by muscle in all and tendons in all directions to make it stable. So, you know, it can be pulled back in all directions by using these different muscular structures. Oh, we did that one, didn't we? Sorry. Here we are. So, you know, notice the way the lower part of the scapula tracts, when we're lifting our hand above the hand above the head. You know, it's interesting. They don't do that image. You'd think they'd have a model of the arm going right around, but they don't do it in this in this app. Possibly because they think people don't have to reach. But you know, it slides around in this lovely way. So learning to feel that, not to force it, but to feel, you know, how that can move, makes a significant difference to the feeling of movement. Mm-hmm. Yes, we'll do this movement too, in both directions at one point in the lesson today. And the thing is that, you know, if this movement is distributed through the whole spine, it makes it much, much easier. Now, one of the things the programmers haven't done is include the rib cage. Now, if we were doing this in real life, the rib cage would be moving. The sternum would be lifting up, and all of the ribs would be rotating in their joints in the back here, you know, where they join in just in the front of the spine there, in here. And it's the same thing with flexion when we're moving in both directions. And look at the position of the hips here. You know, the size of the socket there, so much bigger than the one on the shoulder, you know, because it's much more stability, and, you know, it's you know, and it's also supporting, you know, the whole body above it. So it sits out over the top of the joint much more than does the other one. Oh yes, nice one. No, I shouldn't. Yeah, maybe it's this one. So, often when we're moving, we get a sense of having tight hamstrings or something. We're doing a forward bend or something, and often we get stuck because we tend to focus on the foot and we lose awareness of this area in here, so we don't feel what's going on in the hip socket through here. But just sensing the movement of the knee in a circle and the hip in this area is really quite a useful thing to do, as a means of freeing up. Just focus on the knee and the elbow moving. And of course, by moving the spine and the rest of the body, it makes it much easier. But the thing is, we tend to think of flexibility, as a point often. If our hamstrings are tight, we feel the part of our hamstrings that are tight. We don't sense right around the leg, right around the thigh. And we don't think what's happening in the, how the tension in the neck or the rib cage or shoulders might be influencing the flexibility within the hamstrings. But, let's look at some dances here. This is a company called Pilobolus. They're a Canadian company, I think originally, but they're, from West Coast US. And sort of very theatrical in nature and in the way they're beginning. And this is a part of a TED talk. And I've posted this onto the Facebook page, the full thing. It goes for 14 minutes. Well, look at the position she's in here. Where she's just lifting herself up onto the fingers there. So there's all this counterbalance they're doing. The counterbalance between each other and, when they're doing their partner work. And also, in order to do this movement, you have to counterbalance the weight of the pelvis and the head, or of one side of the body to the other. So maybe we'll play a little bit of it, then I'll play it again and I'll speak to it a little bit just to show you what we're on about. But with these extraordinary dances, you'll see how smoothly they move, and how the whole cylinder of their torso, is active and alive no matter what they're doing. The whole of their body is participating and assisting. It's called symbiosis as well, the piece. So, biology. Have a look at this. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just such a beautiful piece. They came to Australia, it was sort of nothing like this. They tend to do sort of things that are, well, in the, yeah, anyway, this is an incredible performance. But I won't play, you can look at the whole thing. It goes 14 minutes on the Facebook page, or email me and I'll send you a link to it. Or just Google Pilobolus TED and I'll put that in the chat at the end. But I'll just replay that again. Let's just look at that, just in case you're not sure what I'm talking about here. Well, actually, yeah, this here, you know, how she's, you know, comes up into this position to lift herself up. You know, so she has to press down onto this side and rotate the body. But, you know, the two sides work together. Just look at the way she, in fact, I'll turn the sound off here. You know, both hands working to, the way they work together. Now, I'll move on a bit from here. This. In fact, now the way he reaches like that, look at the, you know, the relationship between this leg and that shoulder, this arm. And this arm and this leg pushing down, you know, to move like that and to have this width across here. And as he turns, you know, how both, the whole torso is moving. Now watch this. You know, what he's doing with his pelvis to do that. Let's look at that again. Notice how his legs, it moves over here. You see that? And now how she turns herself when she rolls down. You know, watch how each side, each opposite hip and shoulder, like she's letting herself down from this shoulder. But, you know, how she's organizing the other arm and leg, you know, makes it light. And this rolling, we're going to do some of that at the end, but, you know, it's how when the shoulders on the body, yeah, now the reverse. That's really interesting. Let's look at that again, how she rolls up. Or have I missed it? Oh, yeah, it's rolling down. Hang on, come back to, whoops. So, you know, the arm on the arm and leg on, or hip on the ground pushes up and makes it easy to roll. And as she's coming up now, how she turns herself, you know, and it's the rotation, it's the use of the opposite arm and leg, you know, the opposite hip and shoulder, and the rotation of the limbs. Actually, let's look at that again, the limbs, how she rotates her arms as well, arms and legs. So that, see, the leg is turning out and in, and so the whole cylinder of the body right through is rotating. And in order to balance up here, you know, there's the sense of length, but also the width through here. And once again, this opposite relationship between each hip and shoulder. I'll just share one more. No, actually, no. I'll let you look at. There's one. Yeah, two here. How do you do that? How do you do it and make it so effortless? as I said, have a look at the Facebook site or email me, and I'll and you can find that. And I'll just put that. Whoop. If you just put Pilobolus or Pilobolus TED into the search engine, you'll no doubt come up with that talk. You know, how do you actually get that? You know, they're trained dancers, you know. So I heard 14 years it takes to do basic training for a, you know, professional dancer. But nevertheless, it's interesting, how do you actually have that sort of sense of the strength in the cylinder to be able to, you know, hold your whole torso up from your knees like that, as she was doing at the very end. Really interesting thing. You start off slowly, of course. And, you know, when we walk, we're doing it all the time. So it's there within us all the time. So we'll consider this now in relationship to the shoulders, how we can actually free the shoulders or explore more movement through exploring how the, you know, each shoulder and each hip, you know, the four corners, if you like, of the torso. But, you know, it's the four half cylinders or the four quadrants of the torso, how they can be used to actually make it much easier to move by holding each other or moving away from each other. So look, lie down on your back. Let's explore this. Yeah. It's good. So let's do a bit of a test movement. Well, lie here first. Just notice your contact with the floor. Lift your elbows above your chest, and could you hold onto your elbows above your chest? With, you know, one arm crossed over the other, but you're holding the elbows here. And now could you roll over onto your stomach and roll from side to side, keeping your elbows in this position. Just get a sense of this, how that, you know, how do you do it? And we'll come back to this at the end and see if we can make it a little bit easier. You know, notice if you're bracing or holding your breath or tightening yourself anywhere. And then leave that and come down onto your back and just lie here. And notice your length. From your head down to your feet. And then the center of your pelvis. And the sense of the ellipse of your torso. Now once again, lift your elbows above your chest and hold on to each elbow with each hand. Right elbow, right forearm on top. Notice where they sit. And move your elbows side to side. Just a comfortable range. You'll notice what's happening in your elbows. The funny bone, the part of the elbow we lean on, that's part of the forearm. It's called a bone called the ulna. And it's rotating around the humerus, the upper arm bone. Notice the comfortable range to each side. And as you move your elbows a little further over to one side, what happens to your contact with the floor? Maybe now you could switch your attention from the elbows to the shoulders, to the way the shoulder blades move. And the collarbones, the way they're sliding around the rib cage. And as you're doing that, of course, your heart is beating and you're breathing. So sense the shape right inside the rib cage as you're moving your elbows over to each side. How your rib cage rolls. Maybe have your head to the left and do it. And once again, don't force it. Only go where is comfortable. But what does having your head over to the left do to the quality of the movement in each direction? Well, move your head over to the right and try it. And then bring your head back to the middle. And then leave that. Let your arms down by your side. Just rest there. Notice the way each shoulder lies on the floor. Any differences between them? And then lift your arms above your chest again and maybe have the left forearm on top this time, holding the elbows. Move your arms side to side again, and this time could you imagine that you're moving the elbow that's moving to the side is controlling the movement. So it's like it's pulling the other arm across. Although you don't have to use any force to do that, but it's like the leading elbow is active. How does that influence the sense of what's happening in the shoulders? Well, try it the other way. So use the back arm. So push the arm that's as if you're pushing or you're placing the other elbow down in the direction of the ground on the other side. You know, how does that change the quality of the movement? And actually notice what your pelvis is doing. You know, as you reach over toward one side, what does your pelvis do? Does it roll with it, or does it roll in opposition? Well, try pressing the opposite shoulder, the opposite hip into the ground. The opposite hip as you reach over in one direction. You may find it's doing that naturally anyway. It's like the opposite hip presses into the floor, and the shoulder on the side of the elbow that's reaching over, that presses into the floor. So sense that diagonal relationship between the shoulder on the side that the elbow is reaching toward and the opposite hip, right around the torso. You know how the heart and lungs and, you know, right down through the belly into the opposite side of the pelvis, how that rolls. Well, leave that, let your arms down and rest there. And then once again, lift your elbows over your chest and have the right forearm on top. And move your forearms down so they rest on the lower ribs. They're just hanging there. And now let the right elbow move down toward the right side and then back up to the middle, and then down. The left elbow goes toward the left side. So you're sliding your elbows around the base of the rib cage. Once again, only as far as is comfortable. You know, notice where you feel that. You know, do you feel it, you know, in the front of the elbows or in the back of the elbows? You know, what's happening in the shoulder girdle? You know, think of the back of the shoulder girdle, how the collarbones and shoulder blades slide. You know, when that elbow goes down toward the floor, how the shoulder blade slides in toward the spine. And the other shoulder blade, it lifts and comes forward on the spine. And what's your pelvis doing? Feel as you're rolling over to the left side what the right hip is doing. Or the right side of your pelvis as the left goes down. You know, so you think right around the torso, so your heart and lungs can function easily. You can breathe freely as you do this through the whole torso, and still everything can rotate. And you could move the elbow out to the side. Once your elbow goes down in the direction of the floor where it goes comfortably, move it out toward shoulder height. And then back down toward the waist and back up and down and over to the other side, and feel, this relationship with opposite sides of the torso. How we rotate, how the rib cage rolls in one direction, the pelvis in the other. You could let your head go with the movement. You could even begin to move the elbows, above the shoulder, if that was easy, and down. Maybe even around, you could lift them up over your head and around to the other side and down. But just in a comfortable distance. Don't strain, maybe you're not really going around the head, you're just going in front of the head. That's absolutely fine. Work with where you are. And notice for a moment what is happening in the rib cage to do this. And the pelvis. How do your rib cage and your pelvis move? It's still that opposite pressing, isn't it? But leave that now. Just let your arms down. Rest there. Notice what feels different now. Maybe you can feel the beating of your heart. Shape of your torso. Well, once again, cross your elbows above your chest, this time with the left elbow on top, or left forearm on top. And now reach away with the left elbow. Reach the left elbow toward the ceiling. Left elbow toward the ceiling. And as you do that, notice what your pelvis is doing. Which side of your pelvis is pressing into the ground in order to raise the left elbow toward the ceiling. It's the hip on the same side, isn't it? And feel as your left elbow moves toward the ceiling, well, the left shoulder is lifting too, isn't it? But notice what the right shoulder is doing. You press the right shoulder down. In fact, drive the movement from the right shoulder. Raise the left elbow by pressing the right shoulder down. So you feel how the rib cage is like a ball, round, and one shoulder goes down into the ground, the other one must lift up. And it's the same thing with the pelvis. As the right shoulder presses into the ground, the left side of the pelvis presses into the ground. And notice the supportive gesture of the right hip and leg. As your left elbow reaches toward the ceiling, just notice that relationship between the right hip and the left shoulder. And the right leg moving in toward the torso as the left elbow extends. Well, leave that. Let your arms down and rest for a moment. That feels different. Well, once again, cross your arms above your chest, this time with the right elbow on top, right forearm on top. And now raise the right shoulder up and down, the right elbow. Slowly. And feel what's happening right through your body. How the right side of your pelvis and the left side of your shoulder press into the ground. You know, it's an interesting thing as the right shoulder's lifting, maybe the right leg is reaching away. And the left leg and hip draw in, you know, up toward the arm that's moving up. And think right around your rib cage, you know, so you could sense your heart beating and you can breathe freely. And then leave that, let your arms down and rest. You know, consider the front and back of your torso, head, neck and torso. The depth. And then once again have the elbows above the chest, the left forearm on top. And this time press or raise the left elbow and then keep the left elbow up there and raise the right elbow. And then let the left elbow come down and then the right elbow. And then raise the left elbow and shoulder and then the right elbow and shoulder. And then let the left elbow and shoulder come down, then the right elbow and shoulder. And keep going around in a circle like this. You know, notice the movement through the shoulders, how left shoulder lifts, right shoulder, left shoulder down, right shoulder down. And the way the rib cage slides within that. You know, if you do this smoothly, you know, do you feel your rib cage is sort of moving in a bit of a circle as well? Maybe even your pelvis. You know, because as you raise one shoulder, the opposite hip goes down, then you raise the other one, the other hip goes down. As you do it a little bit more quickly, perhaps you can, begin to feel this circular movement. In fact, leave that. Just let your arms down for a moment and rest. Well, cross your elbows above your chest again. This time have the right forearm over the top. Do that same movement again, except this time could you think of moving your elbows in a circle? They go up and down a little bit, or moving your shoulders in a circle, like you're pedaling a bicycle using your elbows and shoulders. And allow the rest of your torso to be involved. And, notice what your pelvis does. Go slowly, because then it's easy to feel the whole tube of the torso. Not just some point of it, but, how the volume of your rib cage and pelvis and head can rotate and support the other side. Leave that. Let your arms down and rest. Well, lift your knees up. Stand your feet on the floor, hip width apart. Once again, lift your elbows above your chest. Have your left forearm on top. And do that same movement. Circle your elbows above your chest. One elbow reaches up and then around a little circle like you're riding a bike. And now notice what your pelvis is doing. That little circle there. Now leave that, but keep your knees and elbows in this position. Can you drive that from the pelvis? Can you move your pelvis as if you were riding a bike? You're pushing the pedals down with each side. And notice, in order to do that, do it really slowly, and then you may feel that, you press down the right side of the pelvis, the left side of the rib cage, and shoulder presses down, and vice versa. Go slowly so you can feel how the opposite hip and shoulder press into the ground, and then the opposite knee and elbow move in this circle. And then leave that. Let your arms and legs be long. Now lift your knees up, have the left forearm on top, and lift the knees, stand the feet on the floor, and elbows above your chest. And now rotate one elbow down toward the knee, and the other one up, and then reverse that. So move one elbow down in the direction of the knees, and then the other, rotating the elbows round as if you're turning a steering wheel over your, in front of your chest. And what's driving this? You're doing it from the elbows. Consider the shoulders are doing it now. Move the one shoulder down and one up in order to move the elbows. And quite possibly you're also noticing that your pelvis has joined the movement. As one shoulder goes down, does the other hip slide up to meet it or swivel up to meet it? Feel the way your rib cage and pelvis can move together. One side shortens and the other lengthens. And now stay with your knees and elbows up. And now could you move the right knee and the elbows toward each other, just a comfortable distance. And then the left knee and the elbows toward each other. So you lift the knee off, the foot off the floor, and the elbows can move down in that direction. But just notice to do this movement, to move the elbow and the knee toward each other, what happens through the rest of your body? You can focus on the elbow and the knee coming toward each other, and don't strain. It doesn't matter how far you go. Or you could focus on the foot and the shoulder that are on the floor. To do this, notice you may be moving your elbow and your right knee toward each other. Notice what the left hip, left leg, and the right shoulder are doing. This diagonal nature. Your head may want to roll as well. Leave that. Let your arms and legs be long. Now, once again, lift your elbows above your chest, have the left forearm on top. Bend your knees, stand your feet on the floor. Now, move your elbows over to the left, comfortable distance, and leave them there. And now, in this position, could you move your right hip in a circle? Move the right hip in a circle. And feel how that movement, you're probably pressing on the floor with the right foot, the right hip lifts up and it moves forward and then down and back and up. It's like it's making a, this would be the base of a cone, and the top of the cone could be, or the point of the cone could be at the right hip. Sorry, at the top of the cone could be at the left hip, or the top of the cone could be at the left shoulder. You feel as you're moving your right hip in a circle, how that influences what's happening in the left shoulder and out to the elbow. And stay there with your arms over here. Do it with the left hip. Move the left hip in a circle. Now this is going to be a much smaller circle, maybe. But how can you do this, moving the left hip in a way that makes sense, that supports the movement of having your arms over to the left? Leave the left hip. Now move the right shoulder in a circle. Move the right shoulder in a circle. As if this is the base of a cone that extends out to the left elbow. And then move the left shoulder. Leave the right, move the left shoulder in a circle. What has to happen through the rest of your body to make this easy? And try moving the right elbow in a circle. Move the right elbow in a circle. Now, that's going to involve the right shoulder as well, maybe even the right hip. As you move your right elbow in the circle, what happens through the rest of your body? Now, how does your pelvis move? And then move your left elbow in a circle in a way that, enables you to move the rest of your body so that it could support this action. Lovely. Leave that. Let your arms down by your side and your legs be long. Notice what you feel. Now, lift your elbows up again, your knees, and have the right elbow on top, the right forearm on top. Move your arms over to the right side. And now move the left hip in a circle. The left hip in a circle. And consider from here all the way up to the right shoulder how this circle of your left hip can make it easier for you to have your arms over to the right. And allow the rest of your body to be free. So, your head that will be influenced by this movement. And then try moving the left hip in a circle here. How can this move freely that makes sense of this movement, of this position? And as you're moving the left hip in a circle, what parts of yourself are pressing into the ground to make this easy? And then leave that, and now move your left shoulder in a circle. How it slides around the rib cage. And how the rest of your body supports this action. Allow everything else to be able to move. And move slowly enough that you can sense the whole cylinder of your torso and how it can move easily. And then move the right shoulder in a circle. Sense what has to change in order to freely move your right shoulder. And then your left elbow, move your left elbow in a circle. Left elbow in a circle. It's a circle that's moving down toward the foot and up toward the head. Notice how your pelvis moves. Your rib cage. And now move your right elbow in a circle. Lovely. And then leave that and let your arms down and legs be long. Now have your elbows above the chest, have the left forearm on top, lift your knees, and move your arms out to the left side and around. Move your elbows around in a circle now. Is that easier? Above the head and out to the side and down over the lower rib cage. And then next time your elbows are above your head or in that direction, stay there. And now move your right hip in a circle here. And then leave that. Move your left elbow in a circle. Left elbow and shoulder. You know, like it's drawing a small circle on the floor. And actually notice what your right hip is doing. Is that participating? Or can you draw a circle with the left elbow and shoulder and the right hip? Go slowly. And just do one if you know that doesn't make sense, and tune into how the other one is moving. Not just rest there and then move the left hip in a circle. Left hip in a circle, and you know you could move the left elbow in a circle too, where you know the knee and the elbow move away from each other, or the shoulder and the hip. And then leave that and move the right elbow in a circle. The right elbow in a circle. Allow the rest of your body to relax. Then you'll probably naturally feel the left hip beginning to move in a circle. They move together. Or you could alternate and move the right hip in a circle. You know, or even alternate one circle, you know, as if you're riding a bike. So your elbows circling and your hips circling. And then move your arms around again. See if that's easier. Lovely. Leave that. Let your arms and legs be long. Rest there. And now have your elbows above the chest, maybe the right forearm on top. Your knees up, feet standing on the floor. And then lift the knees into the air. And could you move your elbows toward the right knee and then across to the left knee? So the elbows and the right knee move toward each other. And then you come back around and the elbows and the left knee move toward each other. And could you imagine maybe that your knees and your elbows are suspended on a shower curtain? You know, and you're sliding around this ring, a circular ring, so you can just hang here and let everything soften through your torso as your body swivels from side to side like this. Hips and shoulders moving toward and away from each other. You could roll side to side as you do this. You know, is it easier? Well, actually, put the elbows and the right knee toward each other and roll onto your left side. And lie on the left side with your knee balanced on top of the two elbows. You're sort of on your side and your knee is balanced on top of the two elbows. And move your knee in a circle. Round in a circle, you know, like that's the right knee and the right hip are moving in a circle. You know, and the point of that circle is the left hip on the floor of that cone. And feel how the rest of your body can go with this. And roll onto your other side. Do the same thing. So you're balancing now your left knee on the elbows. And move the left hip and the left knee in a circle. Now notice what's happening on the ground. You know, drive this movement from the right hip and the right shoulder and your head. You know, so you allow your left leg and your arms to relax. And then roll onto the other side, and notice you'll do that by pushing with the right arm and leg. And do the same thing here. Roll again in a circle on this left side, but drive it from the left hip and shoulder. And allow the upper arms to be soft. Yeah. Elbows are crossed and the right knee is balanced on top of the elbows, taking the elbows are taking the weight of the leg. And leave that and roll onto your back. You notice the depth of your torso now, the roundness of your torso, the beating of your heart. And hold on to your knees with your hands. Hold on to your knees with your hands above your chest, and now roll from side to side. And notice it's much easier if you move one leg at a time. And that even though, you know, you're moving your legs and your pelvis, the shoulders have got quite a lot of influence. Both of them. You know, the pressure on the ground of that shoulder and also the way the other one lifts. And stay on the left side. Stay on your left side. And now move your right knee in a circle. See, where do you feel this? Could you drive this movement from the left hip? So, you may be holding on to the arm with the right arm, but make the left hip the thing that's driving it. You're circling the left hip, and the right hip and the right leg are an extension that can move around. And roll over to the other side. Do the same thing. Move your left knee in a circle. But notice the quality if you drive that circle of the left knee from the right hip, from the ground. It's how each shoulder and hip support each other. And roll over to the other side again, the left side. And this time, could you hold on to your ankles on your left side? If that's not possible, you can still just hold on to your knees, but hold on to your ankles on your left side. So it means you're lying on your left arm. You're lying on your left arm here. And now look at your right knee and then move it away from you. So you look at the right knee and then you move it down, it sweeps around behind you, your back arches, and your head will move up and look behind you. So the whole spine is shifting. And once again, can you think of this from the left hip? Drive this movement from the left hip. And now move the right knee in a circle here. In, an easy circle. You can explore your range. It means you're doing this from the, the ankles. You're holding on to the ankles with the hands, and your knees and elbows are moving. There's one, your right knee is moving in a circle. That's the active one. The other ones all have this supportive role. And your spine and your pelvis and your head, they're all moving in a way that can make this easy. And then roll over to the other side and do the same thing. On this side, move your elbow, your knee, and your left knee in a circle first, slowly. Then, in fact, look at the left knee with your head and then sweep the left knee behind you so your back arches. And then, rounds, your head comes toward the knee, then it moves away from it. And then when you're ready, move the left knee in a circle and feel how the left knee is actively moving, but the role that the right knee and the two elbows play in supporting this movement. And then leave that, lie on your back and rest. See, now consider your length and your middle. Once again, just lift your elbows above your chest, left forearm on top. And bend your knees, have your feet up, and move your elbows over to the left and roll now over onto your stomach. So you're on your elbows. And then roll back onto your back. Go over to this side. Notice how you can reach with the right elbow. Roll onto this side and come up, and then roll back. You could roll over onto the other side too. And you can reach with the top elbow. But notice that point, when the bottom elbow is on the ground, how, suddenly the bottom elbow can help you shift your legs. Notice how you can roll over in this way. And if you consider the opposite elbow and knee, the opposite hip and shoulder, how they can support each other. Go slowly so that you can feel that. So that, you can use the part of you that's on the ground to assist you to lift or to land softly. And how your shoulder girdle, you can extend. How everything can reach and roll. And the front and back of your torso can work together. Your legs can roll to make it easy. And then leave that. And lie on your back and rest. You notice your contact with the ground now compared to when you first lay down. And the sense of volume within the head, neck and torso. Space for the heart and lungs. And when you're ready, open your eyes and roll onto your side and come up to stand. You may want to lie there a little bit longer, that's fine. But, come up to stand if you're ready. And notice the way everything just sits here. getting the sense of volume, front and back. And shift your weight just a little bit to each side so you can feel how that immediately, the opposite shoulder and hip, how they work together. And then gradually, make that shift larger and begin to walk and feel how the limbs and the shoulders and the hips work together.